You said if you'd have been a better parent. I don't think you could have been
well,
a better parent,
yeah.
truly. That's exactly what I believe real best parenting is to let our kids take their risks and take their lumps and learn from that. I think that's awesome parenting. Yeah.
Welcome to Burning the Ships podcast, and I'm your host, Jason Seward, and today I've got Mr. Mike Cobb on the show. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, I'm good, Jason. Nice to be with you. Nice to see you again.
Yep, last time I saw you, we departed as you just handed me a nice bottle of rum from Uruguay.
That's right.
So, and that rum did not make it past, I don't think, 2 days after that.
What?
No, that was a nice gift, and yeah.
Good.
So I'm excited to have you on here, and I'm going to tell you why. Because we met 2 months ago, almost 3 months ago, in Richmond at a Dealmaker event that was put on by Jim Ingersoll, and both of us are very close to Jim, but we did not know one another. So unfortunately, when you spoke at that event, I had a vendor table on the outside of the main conference room, so I wasn't able to hear your presentation. But Jim, at some point at the event, came up to me. He said, "Before you leave here, you need to meet Mike Cobb and get him on your podcast." I said, "Done." If Jim says that about somebody, they're coming on the podcast. So,
It's true, yes.
so fortunately, I think on one of the breaks you grabbed me and we connected and had a good conversation. You're from West Virginia. We were getting ready to head out to the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, so you kind of told me some things I need to see there. But long story short, you have quite the resume for those that don't know who Mike Cobb is, and it's a very unique path through entrepreneurship. And you've got, along the way, a very good, relatable burning the ship story where you left a very successful career and did your own thing in entrepreneurship. What I'd like to do, Mike, is I want to turn it over to you and let you introduce yourself to the audience however you would like. And before I do that, I want to encourage everybody that's listening to this. We're going to do a second podcast on the Dealmaker platform here in a few months where you're going to really dive into the business side of things, the real estate, all the investment and developments that you've done. This podcast is going to highlight the mindset and the story behind it all. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike, and I'll let you take it away.
Good, Jason. Thank you. Yeah, you were off to go on vacation right after we met.
Exactly right.
So that's good. You know, we need vacations. They help us clear the mind and regain perspective, I think, and it's important. In fact, I'm off on vacation next week, so I'm glad we got this in this week.
Awesome.
So back in the mid-'90s, I went to Belize. I'd never even heard of Belize, but I went to Belize with a buddy of mine, and he's a lawyer, and he was setting up asset protection trusts for doctors in the Pittsburgh area. I grew up in the Pittsburgh area. And so went down there, loved it, said, "Hey, Joel, next time you're coming back, let me know, do it again." So whatever, a few months later, he's headed back down. I go with him. We found a couple condos in the meantime that were kind of foreclosure opportunities, and we bought them. And so that was late 93 into the high season, winter of 94. And so started going down to Belize quite a bit and really just enjoyed being there. But we found a hole in the marketplace. I think that's really the fundamental basis of entrepreneurship, right? We find a need that's either not being served or not being served very well. And if we can do something to change that or add that service, then we can be successful. If we're good at what we do, we can be successful.
Right.
And what we found out, Jason, was there was no mortgage money. So people who were coming down from Virginia Beach area, Tidewater area, or anywhere in the U.S. to Belize who wanted to buy a property or a condo or a home, there was no mortgage money. So no bank up home's going to lend you the money, and no bank down there would lend a foreigner money. And so we started a little mortgage company. That was 94. 10 years later, we turned that into a bank, and we've been a bank in Belize since 2003. But that was our first business, the finance side of things, the mortgage, and then the banking business. We also, later on in 96, we started a development company, real estate development, to build resort communities. And there are then, and still are, product, but it wasn't the kind of product that I would say would satisfy a middle-class buyer. And so we said, look, we can do things like create the standards, put all the door handles in, put the light in the mirror over the front, and put outlets on the walls and stuff like that. We can do a lot of these things, and they're basically free to do. and we can deliver a product to a North American middle-class consumer that meets their expectations. So we could do it better, right? In one case, it was a need that was not being met. And in other cases, we could do it better for about the same money. And then in 98, we read about a reforestation incentive in Panama for really to replant a lot of the jungle and the rainforest that was being cut down. And so in 1998, we bought a 100-acre cattle pasture. And in 1999, we hired a company to go in and plant it with teak trees. And so, we did that back in 99. And I remember there were 6 of us, myself and 5 other partners. We just kind of said, well, we'll figure out what to do with it in 25 years because that's the growing cycle of teak. Yeah. And now the teak trees are up and grown. They're 27 years old. And a couple of years ago, we said, it's time to figure out what to do with it. And we actually built a sawmill and a production line. And in fact, I just got back from Panama last night. I was down there with a group and getting out to see the mill. So we're really in 3 separate businesses, Jason. We have our banking and mortgage business, we have our real estate development business, and we have our timber business. And so we're really in 3 very different areas, but there's a lot of synergies between them.
Yeah, understand. So let's go back a little bit because all of that's very impressive, and but it didn't just happen overnight. You just kind of covered a 10, 15-year window there, and beyond
30.
that, it's 30 plus, right? Yeah. So but your original start was not in other countries. Your original start was not in real estate. Where did you start your career as an adult?
Yeah, so right after college in Northwest Pennsylvania, it was 1986, the recession, the steel industry had collapsed. And so the whole part of Western PA was still just reeling from all the mills closing and so no real job opportunities. So I moved to the D.C. area, Northern Virginia, and got in, and luckily, just totally luck, fell into the computer business on the personal computer side of things. This was, nobody even thought they would ever amount to anything. This is going back to XTs, right, and 286s and stuff. Anyway, so just lucky, fell into that side of the business, helped a Taiwanese couple grow a business very, very significantly from 1987 to 1998. And you talked about burn the ships. In 98, our mortgage company had really started going, and our development company was a couple years old, and I was really ready to step out. It's interesting though, Jason, because I had asked the owner of that company for probably the previous 5 years if I could buy a piece of their business, right? Let me buy into the company. His name was Robert. Let me buy into the company, Robert. And for this reason, that reason, any reason, they always said no. And I wanted to own a piece of a business, right? And so, and not the whole thing. I'm not a big fan of whole ownership, although it can work. But I'm a collaborator, right? So each of the companies that we have is a diversified ownership with partners and investors. But anyway, Robert wouldn't sell me a piece of the business, and so definitely just said, all right, stepping out, burn the ships, and build our businesses down in Belize, Panama, and now we're in Costa Rica, Nicaragua. We have projects in Honduras, and so we're all over the region now. But at the time, it was Belize and Panama.
Okay, so there was an overlap period where you were building a business while focusing on a career. Is that correct?
Yeah, the job up in the computer business in the DC area. Yeah, the mortgage company was a really simple business. We went out to friends and family. We put a business plan together. I went out to a bunch of my buddies in the computer business. Joel went out to a bunch of his doctor clients, and we raised, just under $3 million, 2.5, 2.7, 2.8, something like that. Anyway, the problem is that literally within several months, we'd gone to Belize a couple more times. We'd met with the developers. We'd looked at their property. We'd checked out all the titles, and we bought their paper, and we were out of money, right? Not even a year. We were out of money. So we went back out to the network again, and I think we raised another $1.5 million, maybe it wasn't $2 million. And we very quickly realized that by, 98, 99, like we just couldn't raise money as fast as the demand was for the capital. And that's when we got the idea to turn it into a bank. And that took 4 years. We started thinking about it in 98. We got our license in 2003. So I guess 5 years, but about 4 years of real focus on getting a banking license. But yeah, so when I was going to Belize for like a long weekend, 3-4 times a year, like get out on a Thursday, come back on a Sunday. Like it was easy enough to do that while I was, working in the computer business. But at some point, Jason, you gotta pick your path, right? I think that's what burn the ships is, right? You gotta pick your path and you gotta commit to it. And you just have to go all in. And in 98, that's when I made my decision and action to that effect.
Gotcha. So that I want to stay here for just a few minutes because
Yeah.
a lot of our audience, it's all over the board. Some people know that eventually one day they want to build something that can allow for that, what you just described, or maybe they're right there now. Where I
Yep.
was 3-4 years ago, where I essentially had a growing business and a very demanding career. I had to pick between the two. I didn't have enough bandwidth to carry two forward. And there's a lot of people in that space. And then there's people that may be well beyond that, still hanging on to the two, and they're compromising everything else in their life. So
Yep.
all of that said, that framework, where were you personally in 98? Were you married yet? Did you have children yet? Were you in a position that there were external circumstances that added a little more complexity to the decision?
No, great question, because you're right. People are at different stages of their lives, different external factors weigh in, as they should, by the way, right? It is scary. It's a scary moment, right? And the more, I'm going to say, fixed responsibilities you have, because we have variable responsibilities. We can choose to do things, buy a car, drive the old car. That's a variable, right? But you got a kid, you got a mouth to feed. That's a fixed responsibility, right? And I think the more fixed responsibilities we have, the scarier it is, and the more seriously we have to take that decision, right? Fortunately, I had just gotten married. We did not have children. And so we had the flexibility to, my wife and I, we had the flexibility to take a greater risk. And I think that's really what we're talking about, right? It's a risk calculation. How risky is this? And what's the ultimate downside? Oh, if it doesn't work, okay, what happens? Well, the business fails maybe or whatever, and you have to come back and get another job, right?
Yeah.
And I was in my early 30s, and I guess I was 34, whatever, 34 years old. And so, okay, if I have to start over again in 2, 3, 4 years, I can do it. So I think the risk calculation, the risk analysis was low to medium. Might have been, I don't know. It didn't feel that way. It never
Right.
feels that way, right?
Right.
But in hindsight, you're gonna look at it. Yeah, it was a low to medium risk. But it is scary, and so I think that's a big. In my presentation that you missed, by the way, I'm just gonna rub it in. No,
Yeah. I'll go back and watch the recording for sure.
you don't need to. I'll give you the cliff notes right now.
Yeah.
My presentation was about saying yes, right? And the fear of failure has prevented so many wonderful things from happening. And I did this presentation on this demonstration on stage. I invited 5 people to come up. I took a piece of cardboard and cut it into a 2 by 12, 12 inches wide and about 10 feet long. I laid it on the ground. And I said, if you can just walk from one end to the other, I'll give you a chocolate bar, right? One of them from Belize or something. So 5 people walk across it. I hand them their chocolate bar. I say, okay, now if we were to put this up on top of 2 skyscrapers in Richmond and walk across that same board, would you do it for a chocolate bar? No way, right? Would you do it for $100? No way. Would you do it for $1,000? No way, right? But nobody had any problem walking across it. All 5 walked right across it, right? And the idea is that the fear of failure, the consequences of failure, can really paralyze us. And I think so often in life, Jason, that we imagine this 2 by 12 that we're walking across is stretched between 2 skyscrapers or something, when in reality, it's not laying on the floor, but it might be a foot or 2 off the floor. It might be 5 feet off the floor, right? And if you fall, you could break an ankle or twist something or hurt yourself, right? But a lot of times it's a foot off the floor. But in our minds, we're imagining something very, very different.
Yeah.
And so the exercise was really about saying yes, but saying yes with all the precautions and prudence and due diligence and risk analysis, right? And by the way, it's not just risk analysis, it's proper planning of whatever business that you want to carry forward, that entrepreneurial effort, right? So I think you have to have a great plan. You have to have thought it out. I'm actually a huge fan of writing stuff down. Make a business plan, write it down. flesh it out, let other people read it and shoot holes in it, right? Well, that's not going to work. And maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, right? But the point is that you sound check this thing with a bunch of different people and let them shoot holes in it so that you create the best plan possible. And then, as our good buddy Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. But right? But you know what? I'd rather have a plan and get punched in the face, because that's what life does, right? Than not have a plan and get punched in the face, right? Because at least we can come back to the plan, I guess, theoretically. Anyway, but saying yes, right? Saying yes, but it is my circumstances were 34, just married, no kids, able to take this risk, and very, very glad I did, by the way. But my circumstances were different than many other people's, and I recognize that.
So I wanna frame this up, and see if it is the same for you. So in my circumstances were a little bit different. I had been married when I left my career. I had been in that career 17 years, very successful, high income, very safe, secure, every reason not to leave, right?
Right.
I'd also been married at the time 15 years, 14 years. I had 2 young kids, right? So I did have fixed responsibilities. They were not variable.
No.
But I had the mindset of what you said earlier. I had built a good resume in that career where if I did take a sabbatical to go try something, I could go back. Maybe not to that company, but I knew I could work my way back to some degree where I was.
Yep.
But there's anxiety. My wife had anxiety around it, all that. We had to work through all that. But my question is, I did not have as much anxiety around it because my whole life had been calibrating me to step out and take chances, right? And not be scared of worst case scenario. All the way back to childhood, like I watched my mom take big risk, and some of them not pay off, some of them pay off. I dealt with hard things, and I knew how to do that. So I think that conditioned me to be able to look at any risk and say, all right, worst case scenario, my wife and I might have to live under a bridge for a little while until we pick things up. I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm good with that.
Right.
And I'm curious to know, all the way in your background, were there things and experiences along the way that kind of calibrated you to be more accepting of the risk involved with something like this?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to start with your living under a bridge comment, right? I think that if we look at the worst case scenario and it's still alive.
Yeah, right.
Right. I mean, living under a bridge, you're still alive, right? Like I'm willing to take almost any risk that keeps me in the alive category, right? And healthy. I mean, I don't want to hurt myself either, right? But generally, and so I think that's a good positioning for anyone in the position of thinking about whether they're going to do this or not. Can I do this and still come back to something that keeps me in the game somehow, or lets me get back in the game? And the truth is, for almost all of us, the answer is yes. Right? Again, it's the fear of failure that really prevents us. As a kid, I grew up on the edge of a tiny little town an hour north of Pittsburgh, and the woods went on behind me. I never got to the end of them. They just went on and on and on, right? And
heaven,
heaven, heaven, exactly, right? And my next door neighbor, 2 houses down, their mother would never let them go in the woods, because what if they fell in the creek and busted their head open and laid there and died, right?
Yep.
I mean, like, I whatever.
Right.
I think parenting, my parents, your parents, right? Parenting is so important to shape somebody who's willing to be a risk taker, right? And I don't know if the 2 neighbor boys next door ever really, were able to break free of the, I don't know what you call it, risk cage or something. I don't know. Anyway, but you and I had great examples, and we had the ability to take risk at whatever level it was, and suffer the consequences. I got skinned up and banged up, and you did too, I'm sure. I mean, right, both physically and emotionally over life. But I think again, it's all about perspective to me. Is the risk worth taking, right? Is there some reward on the other side of it that makes it worth taking? It can be financial, it could be spiritual, right? It can be emotional, it can be a lot. I mean, you get in a relationship, that's a risk, right? I mean, she breaks my heart. Well, that's emotionally and whatever, right? But at the end of the day, there's a risk and a reward, and we have to do that analysis. but you're right about the being raised in a certain way. And then also surrounding yourself, right? They say that you are the sum total of or mostly of the 5 people you hang out with the most, right? Or something like that. I think I agree with that, right? The people we choose to be our closest friends and associates, business colleagues, right? We all rub off on one another. And I'm guessing that you've chosen to hang out with people like Jim Ingersoll and others, and I know you have, who have a high degree of risk tolerance, who take calculated risks, right? And then work it through, because it's not just the taking of the risk, of course, right? It's taking the risk and then plowing every bit of your soul and energy into it until it works, right? That's the burn the ships, right?
Yep.
Like you have to plow into it. And when you surround yourself with people like that, I think that the likelihood of success is much, much greater, because they are there. They will be there to encourage you. I mean, just people like Augie and others, right? We love to razz each other. We tease each other. But at the end of the day, I think we all know we each have our others' backs so hard, because we recognize how challenging it is to be an entrepreneur, what it takes, and we're going to be there to support one another. And that camaraderie, or that 5 people network, or whatever you want to call it, is powerful, Jason. It's tremendously powerful.
Yeah, 100% agree. When you're talking about going it behind the woods where you grew up, I think I've got this. It's a hilarious video of my son. He's probably 6 years old.
Yeah.
And we have way behind my house. So the same thing behind my house, just woods forever. But we have a creek that runs through there, and some points of the creek, when the water's high, it's like you can't jump across it. A kid definitely can't jump across it, and it's not deep. It might be knee deep. We were back there one day, and my son said, "Dad, can I try to jump across it?" Now, probably a better parent would say, "No, son, it's dangerous. You can't jump across it." I knew what the danger was. He might get wet, right? That's the worst thing. I said, do you think you can jump across it? And about this time, I'm starting to record. He said, "Yeah, I think I can." I said, "All right." I knew he couldn't. I said, "Let's go." And he goes, he makes about halfway across, goes in, gets soaking wet. He's mad, all that stuff. But had I stopped him from doing that, now he knows, he judged his distance. He knows that I took a risk. Next time I know how far I can go, and I'm learning through doing, rather than somebody telling me what I can and can't do.
Absolutely. By the way, you said if you'd have been a better parent. I don't think you could have been a better parent. Truly. That's exactly what I believe real best parenting is to let our kids take their risks and take their lumps and learn from that. I think that's awesome parenting. Yeah.
Cool. So let's move forward in the timeline a little bit, because I know around 2004, you're getting these companies going. You kind of had another burn the ships moment, where it sounds like at that point you're probably early 40s, and you've been married 6 years or so.
Something like that,
and you guys decide to make a big move. So talk about that move and the next 12 years behind that.
Yeah. So I'm going to back you up to 2002, which is when we moved to Nicaragua. Right. So we'd gotten married. We'd had our first daughter came along in 2000, and in 2000, and that was the same year, by the way, we bought about huge, giant property, 2,500 acres of property with 3.5 miles of Pacific beachfront. Right. I mean, that is a massive piece of property. Anyway, so 2 years later, we needed to go down and begin to build out our business. Right. To hire, whatever. Actually, I mean, mostly consultants at the beginning end of it, right? I mean, master planners, architects, engineers, I mean, all that kind of stuff, right? But then build a team, accountants, marketing people, salespeople, admins, chief operating officer, right? So we had to build our, human resource infrastructure as well as our physical infrastructure on the site. Anyway, so we went down in 2002, took our 2-year-old daughter, my wife, Carol. I said, "Hey, honey, need to get down there for a couple, 3 years." She said, "Okay." I mean, it's Nicaragua, right? Nicaragua in 2002. And a lot of people, I mean, it was definitely rough around the edges. And it's interesting, because Carol and I had lived in Belize back in 1998 for 6 months. And I say this from stage. I said it. I was in Belize speaking at a conference a few months ago, and I said this on stage in Belize. I said, my wife and I lived in Belize for 6 months, and it was 5.5 months too long. I mean, people can't believe I say that. But it's just true. Like, Belize does not work for me as a place to live. I love it for a week. I like it for the second week. And by the third week, I'm like, I'm done. Get me out of here, right?
Right.
Whereas Nicaragua, we went for 2-3 years. And at the end of 3 years, Carol and I went out to dinner. We'd had another little daughter came along, went out to dinner, and we decided that we would stay a while longer because we loved it there. It hit our hearts, right? It just worked for us. And we ended up living in Nicaragua for 14 years. But we kept our house. This was not quite a burn the ship. So because we only thought we were going for a couple, 3 years, we kept the house that I'm in today in West Virginia and rented it. And then we just continued to rent it for that whole 14-year period. But yeah, I mean, we in some ways it was a decisive moment for sure. And pick up your family and move them overseas. But what we didn't expect was that we would love the quality of life and that we would want to stay for a long time. I mean, 14 years. We raised both of our daughters. They grew up in Nicaragua. So, yeah.
That's a good segue because that was my next question. You raised two girls outside of where you guys are from. How has that, I mean, I know we could go on probably for an hour about this, but in general, kind of at a high level, how has that shaped them as human beings?
Well, that's interesting. There's a great book called Third Culture Kids. My wife read it, and she would tell me about it like at night when she'd read a chapter in the daytime, and she'd fill me in on it. What it says basically is that children who are raised overseas are really of a third culture. They're, like in our case, my girls really weren't American per se, but they weren't Nicaraguan either, right? And just to give one dumb example, neither of my girls have ever been to a high school football game, ever. Right. And so when they go to college, well, they're in college, but anyway, they go to college and they're hanging out with a bunch of, their friends, and they're all talking about the high school football game. Like, they can't relate. There's zero ability, right? And there's 50 other things like that. So what this book talks about is that third culture kids are much more likely to connect with each other. And it could be a German kid who grew up in Japan meeting, my daughter, right? And that would be the kind of connection that would make sense because they were both a third culture kid, right? So it's really kind of a fascinating thing. But the one, and you're right, we could go on because I give whole presentations. I gave a workshop, 2.5-hour workshop on this a couple of years ago to families considering a move overseas. The biggest, and I end the presentation with this, so I just go all the way to the end. If you're a fish in a fishbowl, right, and the water of the fishbowl is culture, if you've never been out of that fishbowl, you don't even know that there's water. You don't know that there's a fishbowl. Like, you're just where you are, and it is what it is. When you grow up in another culture, you have to go from fishbowl to fishbowl. Honey, that's not how we do it in the United States, but it is how it's done here in Nicaragua. Or, that they don't do it that way there, but whatever. And so now all of a sudden, and the just, and this is incredible, Jason, just the understanding and comprehension that there's something called culture and that we're in it is a powerful realization. It's just an unbelievable because it just allows so many other things to happen. So I feel like the girls have done very well. I mean, they're bumps. Look, you're a third culture kid, and you've never been to a high school football game. So I think a lot of times maybe they're kind of pushed off to the side for the normal girls or boys or whatever that they're in their friend groups. But ultimately, I think there's a lot more benefit than detraction, and I think they would also agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking as you're talking through the benefits. I mean, that are have to be they have to be more compassionate. They've been exposed to just things that they probably approach life with way less dogmatic of a view of everything than most people, right? Because they've seen, they're used to how, that you're her dad, your wife is their mom. They are used to y'all's culture, which you grew up in, but they're being raised in a different culture. So they're getting this kind of melting pot of everything that has to be beneficial,
It is, I think. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Cool. So you guys moved back to West Virginia in 2016 and been there since, correct?
And the reason is my oldest daughter, who was 15 at the time, received a dance scholarship. She got a ballet scholarship to the Joffrey High School program in New York City.
Okay.
Yeah, because both my girls, I mean, this is the kind of stuff people don't imagine, but like our quality of life in Nicaragua was way higher quality of life, and it cost far, far less. And one of the things that they were able to really receive there was world-class ballet training, and it cost Papa not very much money at all.
Hey, well played, well
Right,
played.
winner,
Yeah.
Anyway, but she got a scholarship to the Joffrey program in New York and moved up to New York for a semester. And then, Mama Bear was not living in Nicaragua with Baby Bear in New York
Yep,
City.
I
So
get it. I get it.
we came back. So
Yeah, good. So,
yeah,
but I mean, through all that, you've been able to run, and we talked a little bit before recording, but now you're kind of you've transitioned into the stage of where you get
yeah,
to work on your businesses, not so much in your businesses, and
right, yeah,
and b- as I say that, I mean, you can't build what you have built without being obsessive with developing yourself as a leader. So take a few
yeah,
minutes to kind of talk through like how, because you were doing that in real time. You're building companies. I don't know if you led a team at your previous job, but once you start building these companies, it's your baby. So not only do you have to lead the company, you have to build the culture and the vision and cast all that vision. So speak to that side of it, and then I've got a follow-up question to that.
sure. Look, it is all about self-development. Very early in my my sales career, I've always been in sales, large. I mean, you build a business, whatever. But someone recommended, and these are old authors, right? Look at me, I'm bald. And these are old timers.
Hey, I'm not.
Tommy, yeah, there you go. Tommy Hopkins, right? How to Master the Art of Selling. Zig Ziglar, Wayne Dyer, Og Mandino. I mean, these were people that I read religiously in early in my career, and also later in my career as well. Although some of the stuff shifted, some of the material shifted to be more I hate to call it technical, but let me use that word technical. Lawrence Harrison is a phenomenal writer that writes about largely cultural issues in Latin America and the Caribbean. Hernan de Soto, The Mystery of Capital. These are Pan American Dream is Lawrence Harrison's seminal work. These were books that helped me really figure out how to do business in the region. So I kind of didn't really leave working on me, but I morphed more towards how do we build a business in another region, another culture, right? But the leadership element is so important. When we first started our development company and we bought 2,500 acres, we said to ourselves, my business partner said, like, we're building a small town, and that's going to take 50, 75, 100 years. And when you start to look at a company and you say, well, we got to have a company that's going to be around for 100 years. And so we really very early on in the late 90s and early 2000s, we really had this big mental, I don't know, morph. And we said, yeah, our bank, let's make sure our bank's around for 100 years. And we planted we planted teak, which takes 25 years to mature and harvest. So when we did that in 1998, I mean, that's a 25-year timeline. And when you cut it down, you have to, but replant it. In 25 years, your kids get it. In 25 years, the grandkids, I mean, on and on and on, right? And so we had this real, it wasn't really an epiphany. I want to call it a slow awakening. Each of these kind of added to it, right? But we just said, like, we're going to build 100-year businesses. We better be thinking internally, how do we build 100-year organizations with people who come along after us, right? And that's been big. And it's interesting because now, a lot of the stuff that our team reads, I can't remember, Jeremy, I can't remember some of these people. I don't even read them, right? I shouldn't say I'm an old, I'm not changing, right? It's horrible, but it's true. I love the authors I love. I read them, I reread them.
Yeah.
I read a new thing once in a while, but the new generation of people coming up, I mean, there are new authors and there are new gurus, and they're following and they're reading them. And all I really care about is that people pick several authors they like that will help them become all that they can be as a leader, as a salesperson, as a manager, whatever that role is. And so we really focus on that. Although someone recently corrected me, he goes, Mike, I really don't read anymore, but I listen to podcasts. I'm like, that
Yep.
counts.
Exactly right. Yeah. And
yeah.
I tell everybody I'm obsessive with reading, and I
Yeah.
am when I listen to 90% of books on Audible, and I
Do
make
you?
notes. Right? Yeah,
Oh,
it's
that's
just,
great.
but
Oh,
and
that's great.
the reason it works for me is I mean, I'm into my 40s now. Since I
Yeah.
was a kid, I can't sit still, right? So
Okay.
like
Yeah.
even if I'm reading, sitting still, if my brain's activated, it's hard for me to do, but I can put in my ear pods and I can go for a
Yep.
run and listen to a book, or I can listen
There
while
you
I'm
go.
driving down the road.
Yeah.
And so that
Right.
that works for me. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing. And it is just
Correct.
keeping the majority of the stuff that's coming in here, your head,
Yep.
uh, positive and focused on the things that are going to help grow
Yeah.
those around you. But you talk about building
Exactly.
100-year businesses, you're building stuff that is going to outlive you. And
Oh
I
yeah.
might butcher the quote, but it's something like the best leaders plant trees whose shade they'll never sit under. Right.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
agree.
that same idea. And that sounds like where you're at now, because you're kind of, the businesses are built. Well,
Yep.
now your time is spent making sure that you're developing these up and coming leaders, that they're going to be leading these companies long after you're gone. And then
Correct.
you've got to develop them in a way that gives them the tools to continue to develop. And sounds like you're really focused on that now.
Well, I am, and that's been maybe the last 3, 4, 5 years, kind of moving, and I think for the next 3, 4, 5, right? If I'm out of this, if I'm sort of out of anything internal by the time I'm 65, 67, I'm kind of right on where I wanted to be, a 12 year process, right? You hinted at something right there, Jason. I think it's really important. It's not just about bringing up leaders and having them evolve into the leaders that they need to be and want to be. It's also about making sure they understand that their real job is to develop the leadership that comes after them,
Yeah.
and making sure they have the tools and resources to be able to do that. Like that really is what creates the ultimate sustainability inside an organization. So yeah, you hinted at that, and I just want to drive that home. That is critically important.
Yeah, in my former career, I was in insurance sales, and then towards the
Okay.
end of it, I was, like a regional manager. So I had a big team under me, and I kept hiring people. We would develop them. They'd be really good, and then they would get promoted or go to a different company. They would grow out of the role. And I remember early on as a leader, I would get frustrated at that. Like, I keep
Yeah.
losing this good talent. And I had a mentor of mine tell me one time, and it stuck with me, and I've kept this mindset ever since. You're not doing your job if that doesn't happen. You are
Right.
not hiring people to stay in the role that you're hiring them for. Now, there's some admin roles that maybe that's the case, but
Sure.
for the most part, if I'm hiring a salesperson and I want to train them and develop them into be the best that they can be, they're going to outgrow where I'm hiring them for, and that
Yeah.
should be a good thing. So that
Right.
kind of changed my mindset when it comes to development and things.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good
So,
stuff.
Mike, I I have a million more questions, and I think a lot of them, I mean, selfishly, they're more related to the real
Yeah.
estate side and the development piece, because
Okay.
it sounds like the start of all this was, I mean, I'm curious, when y'all started up before becoming the bank, were y'all operating as a debt fund, or like how were you guys structured at that point?
Literally, the mortgage company, which we got started in late '93, early '94, was just a group of, I don't know, 15, 20 folks that all chunked in, 50, 100, $200,000 or whatever it was, to come up with that 2.5, $3 million on the front end. And it was I don't know, probably a C corp. I don't remember what it is. Anyway, but we
Mhm.
just set up a tiny little corporation to
Yeah.
pull the money. And then, my business partner and I just went around in Belize and talked to different developers to buy their paper. We didn't actually originate loans.
Yep.
We didn't have the capacity to do that. But we could meet with the developer and say, "Oh yeah, you financed 6 of your sales, sell us your paper," right? And that was the how the business started. So, yeah,
I love the idea, and I can't wait to get into it a little bit deeper in our next podcast. But I
yeah,
just love the idea of recognizing a need, a demand, and recognizing that nobody has figured out how to supply that, and you guys just dive in, and
yeah.
kind of, I'm sure there were bumps in the road and a lot of,
Ooh-wee.
bureaucratic, political, all those things that you had to go through. But
Yes.
what a
Yep.
story. Yeah.
Well, and by the way, may I take the segue and make a shameless plug for my book?
Let's do it.
All right, there it is. How to buy your home overseas and get it right the first time.
I
right?
love it.
Okay, and that does go to the bumps, right? Because one of the things I did over the 3 years was whenever I just write articles or make notes on things. Oh, this was a mistake, and here's how we should have done it. And about 3 years ago, I put it all into a book. I took our consumer resource guide and a bunch of the articles I'd written, and just said, look, if we can help anybody who's thinking about making an investment overseas, whether it's business or lifestyle, right, and making an investment overseas, do a better job than I did on their first pass through, that's a wonderful thing. Just like you said, you hire people, you train them, and they leave, and you get frustrated with that.
Mhm.
But I want everybody who's making an investment overseas to have a good experience. That's not going to happen, but that's the goal. That's what I want to have happen. And my book helps people do that, whether they transact with us or they transact with my competition. If it's a great experience, everybody's better for it. And that's what that book does. So it's available on Amazon. In fact, here's what I'll do, Jason. I have the ability to give it away for free. If people just simply send me an email to podcast@ecidevelopment.com and just write book in the subject line or something like that, I'll give them a link. They can go to Amazon and they can download the Kindle for free. If they want the audio book, they'll have to pay for that. But I can give them the Kindle download for free with the coupon. So
I really appreciate that. And what we're going to do, we'll drop I'll drop all your contact or your website, the Amazon link to the book, that email address as well down in the show notes for folks listening. Right. You can get all that there. Mike, are you or any of your companies, are you guys active on social media? Is there places people can go follow you there?
Yeah, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're probably on a bunch of the others, but LinkedIn, I don't know. That's
right.
I should know, but I don't, Jason. Sorry, man.
Well, we'll find all that and link it down below as well, because I know a lot of folks are curious to hear more of the story, and we're going to give them that on the Dealmaker podcast as well. But Mike, this is exactly what I had hoped it would be. I knew there was a good story here and a good mindset to go along with it. So I appreciate you kind of peeling the onion back and giving us a look into, behind the scenes of the story. And I'm sure it'll resonate with folks. And I look forward to getting a little bit deeper into the real estate stuff here in a couple weeks, couple months, whenever we do that. So
I do too, Jason. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You have a good one. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Burning the Ships. I want to give a special thanks to our sponsor, 608B Capital, helping real estate investors secure fast, reliable funding to fuel their boldest moves. If you're ready to take your investing to the next level, visit 608bcapital.com to learn more. If you found value in today's episode, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps us reach more people who are ready to burn the ships and commit fully to their goals. And don't forget to share the episode with someone who needs that extra push to take bold action. I'll leave you with this. Burning the ships isn't just about removing the option to retreat. It's about unlocking the courage to charge forward. No matter the odds, the past is behind you and the future is yours to conquer. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Burning the Ships.